Hi everybody, it's your boy. Now, in the last nearly 3 years since I've been doing YouTube, I've noticed a distinct pattern emerge regarding with certain individuals within certain extremes or even in the centre of the political discourse. So you'll see increasingly people move from the left to the right, to the right to the left to far right to far left. Sometimes they converge to the centre and become a lot more moderate, only to then suddenly violently shift again, or become very dogmatic in their centrism. And that is how the meme developed. But what fascinates me more is not the fact that somebody becomes far right or far left to moderate left or moderate right. It doesn't really matter. That's something that's very easily understood. You can see why they moderated their views or came to a conclusion that that's better. That's also not as interesting as somebody who goes from one extreme to the other. And I think that's where the horseshoe theory kind of was born, because people notice the same thing that I've seen, that certain groups of people have this trait in them. I don't know what the trait could be. Basically, it can be anything. It can even be something that they're missing, and they seek this thing to fill a gap in their life, a void, and essentially they end up going into extreme politics because they believe that that is the place where that gap is going to be fulfilled. It's kind of like, I don't mean to in any way insult anybody who's on the extreme left or the extreme right, but it's kind of like being in a gang. When you see black youths or white youths or mixed race youths join gangs, they join gangs because they usually, and this is more in the case with the men, I don't really know about the women who join gangs, but with the men, they lack a parental figure, specifically a paternal figure, and this is why they join the gangs, because the gangs basically give them that parental fatherly figure that they didn't get when they were growing up. So that kind of makes sense. So in the two cases I'm using, although one of them technically isn't extreme right, he was actually a moderate before he became, well, progressive, but still, considering what he used to be, you could consider that a radical position. And the other person went from the extreme left to the extreme right. I'm of course talking about David Sherrat and Tara McCarthy. Now, David Sherrat was the person who was a MGTOW IMRA, who then later on became a progressive. While Tara McCarthy, believe it or not, became a alt-righter, but before that, she was a vegan socialist anti-natalist. Now, she could probably still be a vegan. I mean, a vegan can be any political persuasion. I know most of the time they tend to be SJWs, but it's a diet. It's a way of life. It doesn't necessarily have to have any political connotation. So, apart from the veganism, which I'm not really going to get into because that's not really the thing that interests me about her transition, but more the political side of things, how she was from the left to the right. And now these two share similar reasons for going down that path that they chose to go down, but there's some slight differences. Now let's start with ladies first, because I respect the women. Now, Tara McCarthy, she's young. I don't know exactly how old she is, but she's roughly the same age as me, maybe a bit younger. Basically, she's in the same age range as me and Smino. So she has a lot of time to learn and grow. I mean, there's been many years before YouTube, which I might touch on potentially. And she used to be a vegan. She used to be a socialist. And there's a video which I will link down below in the description, which highlights some of these views. It was kind of not uncovered, but somebody found it and posted it on their channel. And she discusses why, at the time, she didn't want children. And, you know, in many ways, I kind of sympathise with it. I myself don't want kids because I'm not anti-natalist. I'm not against people having kids. I mean, you know, it's their business, not mine. I personally do not want kids for my own personal reasons. But she was an anti-natalist, so she thinks that everybody shouldn't have had kids, or rather at the time. Now, she was also a vegan, and she believed, I don't know if she still believes, that killing animals is wrong, and that we should be vegetarians or vegans, and we should not kill them. However, she seemed it was perfectly fine for us to abort babies. Now, I'm pro-choice, but that's the thing, I'm not a vegan. She's a vegan, so life is kind of sacrosanct in the kind of non-religious, maybe spiritual kind of way. So I could see logically why she would go from not wanting to have kids, even though her arguments, apart from the vegan aspect of it, is pretty sound. You can understand the reasons why. You can see why logically it didn't make sense in her head. So she quickly went back to her previous position, wanting to have kids. And that's where my first video response to her comes from. When she was taking Sargon's bait and saying that she wants to have kids, but she's too young to have kids at the moment. She needs to, have a bit of time to live her life, things like that. That's one part of the transition. So I guess logically, there's some things there that didn't really make a lot of sense for her. And I think, technically, she was just figuring out what she believed, what made sense, what did not make sense. And she was thinking about the philosophy. Because if you look at her behaviour in the video, if you look at the mannerisms, the way she speaks, it's completely different to what she's like now. She's somewhat younger, so she's got an air of naivete about her. There's a youthful innocence to her, even though she's speaking about antinatalism, but whatever. And basically, she's a completely different person. Now, when we look at her videos or her streams, she can get all a bit Hitler on us, for lack of a better definition, for lack of a better term. She's basically this authoritarian, smug, crazy bitch. That's the only way I can describe her. She's utterly crazy and angry, like she has a chip on her shoulder, and she's lecturing you. While in this, she's just discovering things and is basically telling us what she's discovered and what she believes in. Also, she looks nicer, and I think she's definitely bringing the hair back. I'm just saying. Now, in this video that I've linked, there's also an Inger file, and this sheds some light. However, I'm not sure it's actually true. So please bear in mind that this is some kind of he said, she said stuff, and whether or not the person who made the Inger picture is telling the truth or not, because it's like a screenshot of somebody who used to know her or claims to used to know her when she was very young, like 18, 19, something like that. And it kind of paints a similar picture to that of Spino. So let's read it. I knew her when she was younger. She used to be known as Tarasita Hanrahan. She was a bi girl that my then boss met on a dodgy site called Seeking Arrangement. My boss at the time was a millionaire and unhappily married, and she became his mistress and his personal assistant that he happened to house in a spare house he owned around the corner. I even remember her bragging to me once that she had to hide in his Lambo when the wife came home. I think he was hypnotised by a young bi girl that was into threesomes and stuff. Anyway, I continued to work for the guy even though this weird situation, and once the wife found out, both he and Tara stuck a pin in the map to choose a place to go to. They ended up choosing Cebu City in the Philippines. I continued to work for him remotely and ended up being asked to go there to help on a business idea they had. That turned into 3 years for myself in Cebu. Anyways, they continued their flamboyant lifestyle, which as you can imagine is very easy in a place like that. In the end, I think they started to hit problems and they tried to go travelling somewhere in South America but broke up at the airport. She always was difficult and highly opinionated. In fact, some of her posts now are in direct opposition to stuff she would insist back then. She left school at I think 13 and she has a chip on her shoulder about that. And if I remember rightly, she was raised in a Hare Krishna sect. And for me, and now my former boss, we are both married to Filipinas and both have sons. But he is still richer than me, sadly. Was shocked when I saw what she's been up to since I knew her. She's come a long way from banging the helper. Proof, taken back in 2010, cut my former employer out of the photo. The Filipino behind is called Aristotle. Yes, I know, silly name, not seen him since. Now, there's a few things that make me question it, namely the fact that in the picture, you can see some girl that might be her, but it's so dark that I can't tell. So, unless somebody can find a higher res photo with actual lighting so I can actually see what she looks like and determine if it's her, that would be nice. That's the thing, I'm not sure if it's her. This is from an anonymous source. This is not somebody using their actual name. They don't tell me what the company was called, and you know, Tara Sita Hanrahan, she's called Tara McCarthy. Now obviously people can change their names, and as far as I'm aware, she's mixed race. And the Indian side of her was like way far back. So unless she's actually lying now because of the alt-right thing she's a part of and is downplaying her ancestry and she's actually not 1/8, she's maybe a quarter or a half, which, to be honest people, because I have family members who are part Indian on both sides of the family, they can either look really white or really dark. It's easier for her to maybe hide how mixed race she actually is. Also, another thing, I've never heard her talk about living in the Philippines or in India or anywhere, or being part of a Hare Krishna thing. You would think she would discuss these things about how she became who she is. Now, unless she has, and I've just not noticed this, I don't know. It kind of came out of the blue while I was doing some research into this topic. Now, the things that make it sound legit are the things that we already know about her. She's highly opinionated. She has a reputation for being a thought. A lot of the alt-right people don't like her because they see her as controlled opposition or somebody trying to use them for money. She's, you know, the typical Jew with the shackles, that kind of thing. Because she's part Jewish, they don't trust her for that. They think she's one of those trad thoughts who are women who use men and pretend to be traditional in order to sucker them in. We've all seen it. It's the right-wing equivalent of a Christine Spankles or a Zoe Quinn. That's basically what it is. That potentially could make it legit. I mean, I can totally see her being in an affair with somebody and having to run away from the wife and hide in his Lambo. I mean, that's probably something she would have done back in the day. Now, another thing was that she's very difficult and highly opinionated. We know she's highly opinionated, but I would say that maybe she kind of mellowed a little bit in between these two stages. So in that video there that I showed, she's very amiable, very nice, calm and relaxed. Well, in recent videos, she's very angry, or at least talks with that stern, smug thing with a chip on the shoulder. We all know what she's like. Maybe that's because she's just recently transitioned to being alt-right. And as we've seen, you know, with your angry atheist phase, your angry MRA phase, we all know how that works. We all know how when somebody's recently discovered something that they don't like, they get angry. So maybe that's probably what it is. Another thing is, the photo itself could be proof, because the guy wouldn't have posted that photo if he didn't think it was her. Now, he could well be lying, he could well be trying to slander her, I don't know. But again, you wouldn't risk that if it wasn't true. Another thing is that she's bi. I don't know if she's bi. She ever said she's bi? Anybody who's alt-right who follows me, you can tell me that, because, you know, again, sexuality is none of my business. And whether or not that proves it's her, I don't know. I don't know how she swings. But what I am interested in is the threesomes and the things she used to do when she was younger and now what she is now. Possibly, she seeks male attention. Now, a lot of people have accused her of this. And we've seen in her videos and in her live streams that she does complain about the negative side of that, about harassment, how she's being harassed in a very Zoe Quinn way. Yet she seeks that attention out, or rather she seeks the positive attention of males, and the alt-right, sorry guys, it is true, you're mostly male. And she can see that, and she sees somewhere where she can get attention. And so she uses that. But then she'll get some negative attention, play the victim, and some white knights will come and gush over her and maybe give her some money. Now, I'm not saying that she might potentially be using people. I don't know. She might be a true believer. I mean, in that video, she seemed very honest, but that's the thing. She seems honest. Maybe from the honest side of things, she's embarrassed about what she once was. She doesn't like the fact that she was promiscuous and cheated with people, or I don't know if she cheated on people, but let's just say she cheated on people, hypothetically speaking. Maybe she was unhappy with being bi, or the way she was being bi. Like, maybe she'd rather be in a stable, loving relationship. Maybe she thought, you know what, I can't be antenatal while, you know, being a vegan, or I'm very unhappy with what I was like as a kid, and this lifestyle, this ideology suits me to a T. But that's the thing that links her and Spino, the gap, and that is attention from the opposite sex. Now let's go to Spino. Now, I knew Spino personally, unlike Tara, who I don't know personally, and for me this gets, you know, nowadays I'm a lot less forgiving and not as emotional about it as I used to be, because I did see him as a very good friend. And I do miss that Spino. I do wish that Spino, that David, would come back. But he's not going to come back now. He's his own man. Always has been. Always will be. It's up to him if he wants to, I don't know, rebuild those bridges. But there's a similar thing with him. Now, he started off as a MGTOW. Not an extreme MGTOW by any means. In fact, he was an unusual MGTOW in that most MGTOWs tend to be older. He was 18 when I first met him. He was very young. He was naive. Now, he reminded me of me when I was 16 to 18, because we both have Asperger's, and he reminded me when I was in high school and sixth form, growing up, learning, and I saw a lot of similarities. Unlike him, I grew out of these things. Like, I'm no longer like obsessed with trying to get girls. I've already managed to do it. I've proven myself that I can do it. It's no longer something that's high up there now. But for him, because he's such a young lad, and it's quite clear that somewhere deep inside he does long for that person to call his own, who he can, you know, be intimate with. And you can see that as soon as he met Dee, he was no longer a MGTOW. And the thing is, you can still be a MGTOW and have a girlfriend. At least back in the day when I first met him, before it became a bit more ideologically strict. Like, there was nothing that said you couldn't have relationships, only don't get married, don't have kids. Although now it seems a lot of them are choosing to completely forego relationships. But he wasn't like that. He never was like that. But the fact that he had quickly stopped being a MGTOW, and as V said, MGTOW in the streets, cooking the sheets. Because he never met Dee. He never ever met her. He never touched her. He never was even in the same room as her. And he completely changed very quickly. I mean, I'm linking 2 videos down below. You can see his Canadiocentrism video compared to his more recent material. It's night and day. And another thing was, he was aggressively, or not aggressively, that's the wrong word, more cringily pursued Lauren Southern because he fancied the pants off of her. And that's another thing. It seems to me that he's very influenced by people who he likes a lot. Mainly women. Although you do maybe get the brotherly types may influence him, you know, the older males, maybe he looks up to them in some way because he wants to learn off them. We all have those people. I've had those people. They're role models. They're mentors. And that makes sense, but he needs to be his own man. It's usually the women. You can see it with Coherent States on Twitter. You can see it with others, but you can see that all the women that he's talked to or he likes a lot, you can see that they influence him in some way, and that changes him. I think it was being rejected by Lauren, or maybe just not being able to get through to her, also helped change him. And then he met Dee, and she was, for all intents and purposes, an SJW. She was. She would follow SJW channels and like their content. She would pretend to be anti-SJW, but she wasn't really. And she probably got him into contact with a lot of the people he now runs with today. And those people are either SJW light or complete believers. And as we've soon seen, he abandoned the MGTOW label, began to adopt more left-wing positions, because when I first met him, he was a libertarian. And then he's become more and more left-wing over time. And then at one point, he was becoming aggressively more anti-feminist, and then it stopped. And the next thing you know, he's attacking the alt-right, which is fair enough. You can attack the alt-right, you can attack the far left. It's all fair game. But it was complete 180. And he basically did the Kraut before Kraut even did what he did, only without the bullshit. He would regularly start to fall out with MRAs, but this was happening long before that. He was saying that some of the old guard should be replaced and the new guard should be brought in. It was essentially atheism plus, but for MRAs. It didn't work because, as we've soon seen, he has developed a very high opinion of himself. And he really isn't that big. He really wasn't that guy who could change a whole movement overnight. He wasn't going to do that. And so, slowly but surely, he subtly removed the MRA label. He is no longer an MRA because he doesn't show it on his Twitter now. Maybe he still is a advocate for men's rights, but he doesn't seem to be preaching it in his videos, from what I've heard. And from what I see on Twitter, he hasn't been doing any activism recently. So there we have it. 2 similar stories about how potentially some people might go to another side of the fence. In the case of Tara and Spino, it's filling a void. A rather personal void that we can all kind of understand. Although it's not something that you should probably be trying to do politically. I think that's something that should be kept out of politics, but that's the culture in which we live in. The personal is now political, and the personal can affect your own beliefs these days. And we can see that Tara McCarthy and Spinosaurus Kid, or David Sherrat, have personal voids, things that they're not happy about in their past, things that have happened to them, events that they're not proud of, or they don't like, they're bitter about, and they seek ideologies to make them feel better. That's what I can see. They seek these ideologies, they become true believers, and maybe not. Maybe they're not true believers, maybe they're using these people. whatever the case may be, this is a fact of life for a lot of people that have moved from one extreme to another. They're filling voids. They're filling something that wasn't filled before by something else. Maybe they were excluded from something. Maybe they were included but became disillusioned for whatever reason. Maybe they fell down the wrong path. Maybe somebody influenced them that shouldn't have been influencing them. And as a result, we have the man and we have the woman that we see today. And there's millions of them like them. They all have their different reasons for joining those extremes, but that is what I've seen. Now anyway, I'm going to end it there. I think I've gone on long enough. This has been your boy. Support me on Make a Support. Like and share the video. Comment down below. Until next time, I'll see you later.